quickly as in elections past, especially the presidential race. With so many vote-by-mail ballots, the process will take longer than usual to count. And that is where we begin right now. Both President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden leaving it up to the voters tonight. So let's go straight to KPBS reporter John Carroll with developments so far. John?
Maya, in fact, it does appear at this hour that we're going to have to wait a while longer until we know who wins the race for president. Let's go ahead and take a look at the map as things stand right now. By the way, KPBS, like a number of media organizations, relies on the Associated Press to make calls as to who wins what in what state. Right now, as you can see in the overall vote, Vice President or former Vice President Joe Biden is leading, but just by the slimmest of margins, just over 62 million to the president's just over 61 million. And let's go ahead and take a look at the electoral. We don't have the Electoral College. Well, right now, the last I saw, well, I'm not going to say it because I'm not sure if it's still true right now. But basically, this race is coming down to just a few states. For instance, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. Those are all still out there tonight. Elections officials in Pennsylvania and Georgia have already said we're probably not going to have much more tonight that would make a decision, but we'll see about that. We are watching that very carefully. There's the electoral map. You can see right now the former vice president is leading in the Electoral College 223 to 174. And you see those states out there right now that are sort of the dusty pink. That is where the president is currently leading, and the dusty blue, Arizona and also Maine, are where the former vice president is leading. Just a quick note about Nevada. They were not releasing results for much of the evening, and then sort of just a first spurt came in, but it was just a matter of several hundred votes. So there's still a lot of counting to go on in Nevada. There's still a lot of counting to go on in Pennsylvania and Michigan as well. Hundreds of thousands of votes in the case of Pennsylvania. Now, a short time ago, the former Vice President Joe Biden did come out in front of his campaign headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware, and he had a few words, and you could say words of optimism for the crowd. Hopefully.
I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. We knew because of the unprecedented early vote and the mail-in vote that it was going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted, every ballot is counted.
All right, now we have some footage that we can show you. You saw a little bit of it at the beginning of the program, but this is earlier today when the president was at RNC headquarters in Virginia, and he was speaking to the RNC staff there and saying, of course, naturally, he felt very good about things. This is Joe Biden, obviously, out in front of I believe that's his campaign headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware, and he was talking about how he felt good about it as well. Now, we're also watching the race for control of the Senate tonight, and at this point, that has been really, really slow to come in. The two changes so far have been one for the Republicans where, and this was no surprise at all, where Tommy Tuberville unseated Doug Jones in Alabama. Jones was not probably going to win that. That was a tough race. And the other one, also not much of a surprise, Cory Gardner in Colorado defeated former Governor John Hickenlooper, who has a lot of name recognition, and Hickenlooper successfully tied Gardner to President Trump, and that was tough for him in Colorado. So that's what we're seeing right now. We'll be back at the bottom of this hour with the latest on both presidential and the Senate. Right now, back to you, Maya and Amitha.
Thanks so much, John. Now, it's been a contentious campaign, to say the least. Now we're seeing results and we're hearing the reaction. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler live right now. He's been out and about gauging the public's response. Max?
Hi, Maya. Things are relatively quiet here in downtown San Diego, but as you can see, businesses like the Ralphs behind me have begun boarding up their windows in anticipation of any possible social unrest. The evening began with voters dropping off ballots or casting their votes across the county in the final few hours of voting. Many sites, like this one in Encanto, have been open since Saturday to allow voters to come in person to vote. But as the uncertainty over tonight's presidential election outcome continues, local businesses are gearing up for possible unrest. The San Diego Police Department has been monitoring for any protests in San Diego in reaction to Election Day, but so far none have materialized. Still, Jorge Collado, who works at Superfly Tattoos in downtown San Diego, says his business isn't taking any chances. He says the shop still had boards from when they last used them over the summer as protests against police violence spread across the country.
This year's been a very unpredictable year. We're not sure what's going to happen. Chances are there might be nothing that happens, but just in case, we just got to protect our assets. We really care about our business.
Maya, there's so far nothing's been going on. Jorge Collado believes that he's going to keep his boards up for at least a week with the election uncertain. That might be a wise decision on his part. Already there's a protest being planned for downtown at 5 p.m. tomorrow. Back to you in the studio.
Thanks for that report, Max. Now we're going to turn it over to Amitha Sharma and her guest for some reaction. Amitha?
Thank you, Maya. The presidential race has been marred by anxiety about voter suppression, a postal service slowdown, allegations of fraud, challenges to when ballot counting should stop, as well as President Trump's refusal to commit to a peaceful power transfer if he should lose. We're going to dive right into this with our analyst, lawyer Dan Eaton, and SDSU political science professor Benjamin Gonzalez O'Brien. Ben, I want to talk about the state of the race right now. President Trump has won the big prize of Florida. Other huge states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, the outcome is not known yet. What are you seeing right now?
Well, I think the takeaway from all this is that this is not the night that many Democrats had hoped for. The polling had shown Biden with a pretty narrow lead in Florida. So there were some that expected that the vice president maybe would take Florida or Georgia or North Carolina and maybe seal this election up early. Instead, what we're looking at is the scenario that some had feared, which is we're waiting on those Rust Belt states. We're waiting on Wisconsin, we're waiting on Michigan, we're waiting on Pennsylvania, and the vice president's fortunes are really going to turn on those three states. And right now, Trump is leading in some of them. Or all three, I think, actually, at this moment. And so if you're the Biden campaign, you're sweating a little bit at this point.
Dan, I want to bring you in. President Trump has said repeatedly that he thinks that all vote counting should stop on election night. Have states ever done that in the past? And is that legal? Is there a law that says that they should do that?
Well, what the president really is referring to is the fact that only votes that are received by election night, which is true in a number of states, including some of the battleground states, can be counted. You can't count votes after Election Day when they are received after Election Day. Understand that certain courts have actually extended the time for ballots to be received, and that sometimes goes at odds with what the legislatures have enacted as far as when votes are valid. That's where the fight is going to be, not the counting. The counting, of course, there are half a dozen elections in recent memory where the counting has gone on well into the night. The issue is whether ballots that are received afterwards and that courts have allowed to be received afterwards because of pandemic-related complications can be counted. That's where the legal fight is going to be, if there is a legal fight to be had.
Ben, there was so much nervousness, there was so much anxiety about Election Day and whether or not there would be a ton of voter intimidation at the polls. How would you characterize the day?
Well, it seems like the in-person voting today actually went a lot more smoothly than than many people had predicted. There were some reports of instances of voter intimidation, but they didn't seem particularly widespread. And the lines that were expected today didn't really seem to materialize. And so a lot of the apprehension about what would happen today seemed a little unfounded. We had a relatively smooth electoral process, and I think this really speaks to the advantages of allowing individuals multiple ways of casting a ballot. So many states allowed people to vote either by mail or via drop box or in person, and that took a little bit of the stress off Election Day voting.
And Dan, really quickly, Republicans in hotly contested states have said that they intend to file lawsuits alleging fraud, miscounts, tainted ballots, irregularities. Irregularities. What kind of success do you expect them to have very quickly?
Well, so far they haven't had much success, and we'll just have to see. The courts are going to have to weigh this very closely, but it's going to depend on how rather than later.
Thank you so much for that. And Maya, we'll check back in with our analysts, Dan Eaton and Ben Gonzalez-O'Brien, for their take on early voting results in our congressional races and our key local races.
Thanks so much, Amitha. Turning now to the big race in city politics, and that would be the San Diego mayor's race, where Kevin Faulconer is termed out. The race now between State Assembly member Todd Gloria and City Councilwoman Barbara Bree. Gloria, who served as interim mayor in 2013, had a big lead in the March primary, but since then Bree had closed the gap. And again, you'll see the results are being reported differently tonight. You're seeing Todd Gloria is quite in the lead at 57%, and Barbara Bree is at almost 43%. Now, the Registrar of Voters is not making precinct information available as usual. Instead, we are displaying the number of ballots that have been counted and their respective percentages. And again, you see Todd Gloria in the lead there. And the mayor's race, like many races, is not without its finger pointing. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen has been following the race from the start and is in the newsroom with reaction to the results so far. Andrew.
Yeah, Maya, well, things aren't looking great for Barbara Bree. As you mentioned, late polls close to election night showed her closing that gap and being fairly neck and neck with Todd Gloria. But of course, now we see Gloria with a substantial lead over her, 57% to Gloria's roughly 43%. Now, the council member gave some remarks just a few hours ago. She said she acknowledged that she's behind, but thought back to the March primary when she was actually in third place at that point on election night, and later, as more votes were counted, pulled up to second place. Now, that being said, that gap that she had to close in March was not nearly as big as this one. Her deficit right now will be very, very difficult for her to overcome in the coming weeks. Now, Bree sought to build a coalition of some Democrats, some independents, and a good share of the city's Republicans, casting herself as an outsider who would shake up City Hall, break the status quo. Based on these early results, that doesn't appear to have been a super winning strategy. Now, Todd Gloria, on the other hand, really sought to tie himself to the national Democratic ticket. He, of course, as you mentioned, was interim mayor in 2013, and he said, you know, that direct experience with this job made him the better qualified candidate. He also won the endorsement of the county Democratic Party and some very high-profile Democratic elected officials, including Governor Gavin Newsom, Senator Kamala Harris. And he's got a long history in elected office. He's been in the public eye in San Diego for more than a decade. San Diegans know him, so that may have also worked in his favor. Of course, we're going to be following this race as votes are counted in the coming days and weeks, but as things stand now, things are looking very good for Todd Gloria for the San Diego mayor's race. Back to you, Maya.
Thanks, Andrew. Now to break down how the county supervisor races are taking shape. In District 1, longtime Supervisor Greg Cox is termed out. The race now between Community College Board President Nora Vargas and State Senator Ben Hueso. And the results are showing Nora Vargas with a healthy lead at 54.5% to Ben Hueso's 45.5%. To District 2, the largest in the county and covers most of East San Diego County. This district is about to see a big change with Diane Jacob termed out and leaving office after 28 years. Poway Mayor Steve Voss chasing the seat along with fellow Republican Joel Anderson, a former state senator. The check on the numbers shows Steve Voss. It's a close race. Steve Voss is at 51% and Joel Anderson is at 49%. And now to the 3rd District Supervisor's race. Incumbent Kristen Gaspar against UC San Diego professor Tara Lawson-Remer. A look at the numbers shows Tara Lawson-Remer with a very healthy lead at 60.9%, 61% essentially, to Kristen Gaspar's 39%. Now to the hotly contested 50th congressional seat left vacant by Republican Duncan Hunter Jr. He resigned after pleading guilty to a felony charge of stealing campaign funds for his personal use. And in fact, this is the first time in 40 years someone other than a Hunter will represent the district. This one had Democrat Amar Campa-Najjar going up against longtime lawmaker Republican Darrell Issa. You can see the numbers are for Amar Campa-Najjar so far at 50.4% to Darrell Issa at 49.6%. It's a very, very close race. Polls have shown both candidates ahead before tonight, and the numbers are showing clear that it is a very tight race so far. To another controversial congressional race, candidate Sarah Jacobs and San Diego City Council President Georgette Gomez looking to take the seat of Democrat Susan Davis, who is stepping aside after almost 2 decades in the 53rd District. These two called each other out over campaign ads and comments, and in fact, the Associated Press has already called Sarah Jacobs for this race. She's at 59.1%, and Georgette Gomez is at 41%. But how is reaction to the early results for these races? For that, we are going to turn to KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman. Matt?
Maya, we have an extremely close race out there in San Diego's East County, sort of the last Republican stronghold out here in San Diego County that also dips up into Riverside County there. Now, some people might be surprised. We're seeing Amar Campa-Najjar here with 50.3% of the vote to Issa's 49.7%. Now, talking to some political analysts, they thought, as we see a trend of some mail-in ballots favoring Democrats, that we would see with Amar with a lead like this, and then maybe Issa start to chip away at that lead. We know that Issa has been trying to do that with ads. This race they spent a ton of money and raised a ton of money in this race. If you look at all congressional races here, Maya, this race is the ninth in terms of funding. We're talking $18 million has been raised here in this race. And Campa-Najjar, we're seeing him with the lead tonight. We had a chance to briefly hear from him as returns started coming in. Actually, we're going to keep moving on here. Issa, we see 49. Haven't heard anything from the Issa camp. We were thinking that we were going to get something from them. Still nothing out of them. So moving on to the 53rd race, another big one. Susan Davis retiring after 20 years. And you see Democrat Sarah Jacobs up against Democrat Georgette Gomez. Sarah Jacobs trouncing right now, 19-point lead, I should say. And we did see Georgette Gomez here. She put out a statement on social media saying, as votes here in San Diego continue to be counted, the results of the election do not seem to be what we have all hoped for. While we did not win this one, I will never give up fight for the equality and justice and a sustainable planet there. And Sarah Jacobs was talking with supporters after today. She is very excited as she talks about ushering in this new sense of leadership now. Sarah Jacobs, of the Qualcomm family. We know that she's self-funding a lot of her campaign there. Georgette Gomez not able to keep up with the TV ads in there. Maya, we'll send it back to you in the studio.
Regardless of who the next president is, we need leaders in Congress who will stand up for what their districts need, not what special interests or lobbyists or donors demand.
Yeah, and as you can see there, we also heard Sarah Jacobs say that she wants to work with Georgette Gomez here, that she thought she was a very formidable opponent, and it appears that Georgette Gomez has conceded. We do know that the AP has called that race, so Sarah Jacobs is heading to Washington, D.C.
Great. Thanks so much, Matt. Let's go now to KPBS's Amita Sharma.
Thank you, Maya. Some very telling results among our major local races tonight. We've got a lot of ground to cover with our analyst, lawyer Dan Eaton, and SDSU political science professor Ben Gonzalez-O'Brien. I want to start with the 53rd Congressional District race. It looks like that race has been called for Democrat Sarah Jacobs. She was running against San Diego City Council President Georgette Gomez. Dan, I want to start with you. Are you surprised that this race wasn't more competitive?
Well, I think that the issue really came down to youth and breadth of experience, according to the San Diego Union Tribune's endorsement. I don't think it at all can be talked. You can always chalk it to money. It was more than that, I think, and I think that you can never read the minds of what the voters had in mind. But clearly, this was an interesting race. We didn't know the margin was going to be this large. That's for sure.
Okay, Ben, let's turn our attention to the 50th Congressional District race, a very closely watched race. How surprised are you that Democrat Amar Campa-Najjar is running even slightly ahead of former Republican Congressman Darrell Issa in a deeply red district?
Well, I think it's pretty surprising considering the poll that was released shortly before the election that showed Issa with an 11-point lead. I thought that lead was a little large. I didn't expect Issa to have that kind of lead in the 50th, but this is a surprising result. Now, we don't have a lot of, there's still a lot of votes to be counted in the 50th. So I think it's premature for Kempe-Najjar to take too much of a deep breath at this point. But this looks really good, and this actually looks like it could be a surprise. That said, there's still a lot of votes to count, and Issa has a lot of time to make up that very small margin that Kempe-Najjar is leading by at this point.
Okay, Dan, let's talk about the San Diego mayor's race. We've got two Democrats, Todd Gloria, Barbara Bree. They both hold similar views on the homeless and mental health and police and the pandemic. Todd Gloria is 42, Barbara Bree is 71. What does this race come down to?
Well, it came down to wanting a seasoned, experienced, known quantity in Todd Gloria. Remember, Barbara Bree is only finishing her first term as a city councilwoman, and ultimately that's what voters probably went with. Todd Gloria has been mayor in an interim capacity, and the voters appear to say, let's give him another shot for 4 years.
We have got a long way to go tonight. More races, more reaction ahead with Dan and Ben. Back to you, Maya.
Thanks so much, Amitha. Now, making sure all the ballots are in and accurate is the job of the San Diego County Registrar of Voters and his staff. Let's turn now to KPBS reporter Shalina Chatlani, who joins us now with an update. Shalina.
Thanks, Maya. With around 58% of the ballots counted so far tonight, the vote has gone smoothly at the Registrar of Voters office. Though there was one big error, the Registrar of Voters accidentally put up results which went live on the site before the polls were closed and were up for about 20 minutes. Those were taken down. In a statement, the Registrar of Voters, Michael Vu, said it was due to human error, and now they're just focused on publishing the results the right way. But in general, the number of people who cast their ballot tonight at the Registrar's office appeared to be much lower than in the last election in 2016. As you see here, there were no lines just an hour before the polls closed at 8, though that didn't mean voters didn't make the effort to get out there. In fact, Vu has said that he expects voter turnout to exceed the percentage in 2016, which was at 81%. I spoke to one such dedicated voter, Willie Washington, who showed up with his daughter, despite her going through chemo treatments recently.
I felt like it was for her to come out, and for myself, and for who are, you know, as American and living in this country, such like that, no matter what we're going through. We have an obligation to do what we're supposed to do, and that's vote for our rights.
The lack of numbers also has to do with the focus on mail-in ballots. There was also an expansion in options for voters to cast their ballots in person this year, with 235 so-called super poll sites that were open 4 days before Election Day. Now, keep in mind, tonight the vote is not based on precincts reporting, but as a percentage of ballots returned. So judging by the number of people who showed up today, it's evident that the real focus here will be on those mail-in ballots and how quickly those will be processed. Again, that's at 58% of the vote so far. Back to you, Maya.
Thanks so much, Shalina. Now, as new numbers come in, we want to keep you updated. So let's check in on the returns in the presidential race right now. We're seeing Joe Biden is at 50% and the President Donald Trump is at 49% so far. We're getting our numbers from the Associated Press. And here's a look at where the Electoral College map stands now. If we can get that map up, we'll try and get that for you in a little bit. 24 to 212. So we have 224 to 212. Now we need 270 to win. Now, earlier tonight, Biden addressed his supporters saying he is feeling good and is telling everyone to wait until every vote is counted. He's asking everybody to be patient. Biden is in his hometown of Wilmington, Delaware. The president is spending the evening in the East Wing of the White House with senior staffers and family members by his side. And we have some results now coming in on some of the measures on the ballot. We're going to start with Measure A. Measure A, an increase in property taxes to help address the need for affordable housing. This would need a 2/3 majority to pass. And a look at the numbers shows that the yeses have it so far at almost 58% and the noes are at 42%. Now let's move on to Measure B, the Charter Amendment, establishing Independent Commission on Police Practices. The City Council voted unanimously to put this on the ballot, which needs a simple majority to pass. And the yeses have it so far at 76% and the noes at almost 24%. Now to Measure C, which would change the SD-USD school board elections to by district only. And the yeses are at almost 70% and the noes at 30%. Now let's move to Measure D. If successful, this would allow school board members to be removed for cause and then fill those subsequent vacancies. The yeses are overwhelming at 87% and the noes are at 13%. Now to Measure E. A yes on this measure would remove the 30-foot height limit in the Midway District. And so far, the yeses have it at 57.6% to 42% noes. And now there is also Measure J, the Lemon Grove Initiative to fund municipal expenses like fire, safety, roads, and recreation. It establishes the cannabis business tax in the city of Lemon Grove. The yeses are at almost 74% to the noes at 26%. Moving on now to Measure L. This is the North River Farms project in Oceanside. A yes vote would affirm the City Council decision to change the zoning of property. And the noes have it at 67.4% to 32.6% for the yeses. To Measure P, the Farm in Poway development plan, where voters will decide the future of the Stonebridge Country Club property, which has been closed to the public for 3 years. The yeses so far at 63% to the noes at 36.7%. And for more updated numbers on all of the races, we are continuing to display the results at the bottom of your screen. And we want to thank you again for staying with us for our special KPBS election coverage. I'm Maya Trabulsi.
I'm Amitha Sharma. We have more results coming, and we have our reporters getting reaction from candidates. And we have our guests, our legal analyst, Dan Eaton, lawyer, and SDSU political science professor, Ben Gonzalez-O'Brien. More with them in a moment. And Maya, we have much more analysis to come on Prop 22, the San Diego mayor's race, and of course the presidential race.
First, though, we turn again to the race we all have our eyes locked on. That is the race for president. It's been quite the night as election returns continue to come in on this final day of voting. And now, as you can see on the screen, we have Joe Biden at 50% and Donald Trump is at 49%. Let's go straight now to KPBS reporter John Carroll, who is staying on top of this race for us. John?
Maya, that's right. In fact, it does appear at this hour we're going to have to wait a while longer until we know who wins the race for president. So let's take a look at that electoral map as things stand right now. Now, KPBS, like a number of media organizations, relies on the Associated Press to make calls as to who wins what state. And right now, things are really hinging on a handful of states. If we go ahead and take a look at the electoral map, we're looking at Pennsylvania still yet to be called, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada. Perhaps North Carolina is still in play, although it's razor close right there. Now, since the last time we talked to you, we had Nevada, the AP, that is, had Nevada leaning towards Trump. It has now been switched to leaning towards Biden, as you can see with the light blue. The overall count right now, Biden at 224, Trump at 213. And the counting goes on in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Georgia. Earlier, state officials in Georgia said that they would not have any more results, or at least not conclusive results tonight. Earlier tonight, just a few minutes ago before we came on the air, Joe Biden came out to talk to the crowd gathered in Wilmington. That's his headquarters, of course, in Wilmington. And he told them that at this point, just be patient. But he said he was very optimistic at this point. And he really did seem very upbeat as he was talking to the crowd. Of course, they were honking and cheering and everything. Tonight, the president is hosting a gathering at the White House, and he did tweet just a few moments ago, if we can take a look at the tweet, that he said basically that the Democrats are trying to steal the election. Joe Biden responded on Twitter not too long. There it is. We are up big, he said, but they're trying to steal the election. We'll never let them do it. Votes cannot not be cast after the polls are closed. Well, votes are not cast after the polls are closed. Then the former vice president responded on Twitter not much later after that, if we can go to that one, and he just basically said that, look, this is up to the voters, and the voters are going to be the ones that are going to decide it, not the president or any other source. So that is where we're standing tonight. The Senate right now still looking pretty much the way it was last time I talked to you. The Democrats picked up one seat, that's so far, that is, Cory Gardner in Arizona, and the Republicans picked up one, which was Tommy Tuberville in Alabama. Neither of those are big surprises. Alabama, of course, is a ruby red state, and Colorado has been trending more blue over the years. So that is where it stands tonight. The Senate still in the balance. The House, it is looking like at this point that the Democrats will pad their numerical advantage in the House right now, and they certainly will continue to keep control of the House. That's where it's looking as far as the national picture goes. Maya, Meetha, back to you.
Thanks for staying on top of that, John. Locally and across the country, law enforcement agencies are prepared to handle any protests that might erupt as a result of emotional reaction to tonight's results. So KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler is monitoring activity around the county, and he joins us live with an update.
Hi, Maya. Things are relatively quiet down here in downtown San Diego. Of course, normal Gaslamp festivities continue, but businesses like the Ralphs behind me have begun boarding up their stores in anticipation of any possible social unrest. The evening began with voters dropping off ballots or casting their votes across the county in the final few hours of voting. Many sites like this one in Southcrest have been opened since Saturday to allow voters to come in person to vote. But as the uncertainty over tonight's presidential election outcome continues, local businesses are gearing up for possible unrest. The San Diego Police Department has been monitoring for any protests in San Diego in reaction to Election Day, but so far none have materialized. Still, Robert Nava, a tattoo artist at Superfly Tattoos in downtown San Diego, says his business isn't taking any chances. This is the second time they've boarded up since the summer. The first time was the protest against police violence.
We're just doing it as a precautionary measure. We don't really know what's going to happen, so we're just trying to play it safe. I mean, these are nice windows, so we don't want to mess them up.
He says they're planning to keep the boards up until next week as a general unrest continues, as we don't know the outcome of this election. Already there's a protest being planned for tomorrow in downtown San Diego that's being called for 5 p.m. Back to you in the studio, Maya.
And we want to get an update now on the top local races. Let's start with the race for mayor of San Diego. Two Democrats, City Council member Barbara Bree fighting for the seat alongside State Assembly member Todd Gloria. And the results so far, you can see Todd Gloria is leading the race at 57% and Barbara Bree is at 43%. And here's a look now at the council races in the city of San Diego. Let's start with District 1. Joe LaCava and Will Moore facing off. Joe LaCava is at almost 62%, to Will Moore is at 38%. Now to District 3. Stephen Whitburn against Tony Duran. Stephen Whitburn is at 63.4%. Tony Duran is at 36.6%. Turning now to District 5. Joe Leventhal up against Marnie Von Wilpert. Marnie Von Wilpert is in the lead at 56.4%. Joe Leventhal is at 43.6%. Now let's move on to District 7. Raul Campillo facing off against Noli Zosa. Raul Campillo is in the lead at 58%. Noli Zosa is at just under 42%. Finally, to District 9, Kelvin Barrios against Sean Elo Rivera. Sean Elo Rivera is at 64% and Kelvin Barrios, 36%. So what does the outcome of these races mean for the San Diego City Council? For more on that, as well as reaction to results, we are joined by KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen in the newsroom. Andrew.
Well, Maya, I want to look at a couple of key races here, and in particular, San Diego City Council District 5. You mentioned Deputy City Attorney Marnie von Wilpert with a double-digit lead there. Now, this is one of the two races this year with a Democrat versus Republican. Von Wilpert, a Democrat, Joe Leventhal, the Republican in the race, and she's got now a lead of about a little over 56%. Now, this is a very significant thing for District 5, which used to be the Republican stronghold in San Diego. So if Democrats are able to flip this district, it's currently held by an independent, former Republican. Now, if Democrats are able to pick up this district, District 5, that could they are poised to take an 8-1 majority on the San Diego City Council. Now, looking at District 7, this is the other district in which we have a Democrat versus Republican. We have a Democrat, Raul Campillo, also a deputy city attorney by chance, and Republican Noli Zosa. Raul with a strong double-digit lead, again also 58% there to Noli Zosa's 42%. Now, this race this district is held currently by a Republican, Scott Sherman. He ran for mayor and lost in the primary. Trended more Democratic historically, so it's not a surprise that Campillo is doing a little bit better than von Wilpert in District 5, but these two races absolutely show that Democrats are taking control of the San Diego city government, and with that means a host of different issues that they could be prioritizing in terms of city policy, and it could also mean that whoever wins the mayor's race, if Todd Gloria's lead currently holds, he would have a carte blanche virtually to enact his agenda with a strong Democratic majority on the San Diego City Council. Again, of course, we should always mention these are early results, and these results, often early results, mail ballots, and in-person voting early before Election Day tend to skew Democratic. So we might see those races in District 5 and District 7 narrow just a bit as we count more votes in the coming days and coming weeks. Back to you in the studio, Maya.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Now we're going to turn it over to KPBS's Amita Sharma with some analysis.
Thank you, Maya. Key local congressional races and Prop 22 have garnered national attention. For thoughts on these races and other developments, let's bring back legal analyst Dan Eaton and SDSU political science professor Benjamin Gonzalez O'Brien. I want to turn our attention to the District 3 race in the Board of on the Board of Supervisors. Dan, let's start with you. If Democrat Tara Lawson-Remer defeats Republican incumbent Kristen Gaspar, there will be a Democratic majority on the board for the first time in a long time, if ever. What does this shift mean for the county as a whole?
Well, the shift means the allocation of public funds and the priority that the County Board of Supervisors will set. It also means, importantly, the shape of the response to this ongoing and very persistent pandemic, which of course has primarily been led by Dr. Wilma Wooten, our public health officer, but it depends on the support of the County Board of Supervisors, and an expanded Democratic majority is going to support her more vigorously in her efforts to take more aggressive measures in dealing with the pandemic.
And Ben, let's talk about District 1 on the Board of Supervisors. In that race, either college trustee Nora Vargas or State Senator Ben Hueso will win. This is an area hit hard by the pandemic and fallout from that, meaning unemployment. What can the next supervisor do to help jumpstart a recovery?
Well, I know Nora Vargas has talked about tapping into some of the rainy day fund that the county has to address some of the fallout of the pandemic. And I think that may be one of the things that's maybe giving her a little extra push here. She's leading in the polls. She looks like she's going to beat Ben Hueso, although there's still a lot of vote to come in. But I think her background and her desire to use some of that funding to try to help out a really hard hit portion of the county is something that is very important to voters.
You know, Dan, I want to turn our attention to Prop 22, which would classify rideshare drivers as independent contractors. Uber, Lyft, and others put a lot of money, more than $200 million, into getting Prop 22 passed. It looks like it is going to win. Critics say, look, if these companies could spend this much money on getting the measure passed, why not just pay their workers more and give them benefits as well? Is that a fair criticism?
I'm not sure that it is, because this is fundamentally about the classification of these workers. It's independent contractors versus employees. And there are a lot of costs associated that go well beyond even the hundreds of millions of dollars they spent on this initiative. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. But if it passes, you're going to find a new kind of independent contractor. And the question is whether other industries will copy Uber and Lyft's example and try to get similar kinds of exemptions for their workers.
Ben, let's quickly pivot to the 49th congressional district race. Back during the March primary, this was seen as the one district that Republicans actually had a shot at. They had a very narrow voter edge. That has changed. For the first time ever, Democrats outnumber Republicans. It looks like Democratic incumbent Mike Levin is holding on to his seat. What changed?
Well, I think that you're seeing this across the county right now. You're seeing a lot of shifts in favor of Democrats in races for the mayor and in favor of Democrats that are perhaps a little further to the left in, say, Todd Gloria. So I think part of it is the shift that we're seeing in San Diego County and the region more broadly. I think also part of this could be due to demographics. This was expected to be a closer race, and it doesn't look like it's going to be all that close at this stage. Although, just to reiterate what I've said multiple times already, we still got some votes to count, so we don't want to declare winners prematurely, but this does look like Levin's race to lose at this point.
Dan, let's talk a little bit more about the 50th Congressional District, where Amar Campa-Najjar seems to have a very, very narrow lead over former Republican Congressman Darrell Issa. During this campaign, Campa-Najjar moved to the right. How do you think that worked for him?
I actually think it's more about the image that he portrayed in his very ubiquitous commercials, which is as a young local guy with a gun, to put it very simply, and that seems to have taken hold. But again, this is a very long night that we are looking into tomorrow.
And Maya, we're going to come back with more analysis with our experts, Dan Eaton, lawyer, and SDSU political science professor Ben Gonzalez O'Brien.
Thanks so much, Amitha. Now, one of the local races that garnered the most attention and, frankly, campaign money, the 50th congressional seat. In fact, we were just talking about that, Amitha. It was left vacant by Republican Duncan Hunter Jr., who resigned after pleading guilty to a felony charge of stealing campaign funds for his personal use. Now, let's take a look at the updated numbers so far. Democrat Amar Campa-Najjar versus Republican Darrell Issa. We had the numbers on the screen just a moment ago, and it seemed that Darrell Issa had started to catch up with Amar Campa-Najjar's earlier lead. Of course, these are still early results, and we're going to keep watching them. There we have the numbers right now. Yes, you can see that Darrell Issa, in fact, has a very narrow lead now, so he has caught up and then some. And now to the 53rd district race, where Democrat Susan Davis stepped aside after nearly 2 decades in the House. Well, you had Democrats Sarah Jacobs and Georgette Gomez facing off. Now, the numbers are showing you that Sarah Jacobs had a very healthy lead at 59%, and the Associated Press has, in fact, called that race for Sarah Jacobs. And of course, returns keep coming in, and many results to get to. So let's update you now on the county supervisor contest, starting with District 1, Community College Board President Nora Vargas and State Senator Ben Hueso. Nora Vargas has a 10-point lead on Ben Hueso in District 1. And District 2, which is the largest in the county and historically red-leaning, you have 2 Republicans, Steve Voss, who's Poway mayor, against fellow Republican Joel Anderson, who is a former state senator. The numbers are showing that Steve Voss continues to have the lead even in this early time at 51% to Joel Anderson's 49%. And now to the 3rd district supervisor's race. Now, incumbent Kristen Gaspar was against UC San Diego professor Tara Lawson-Remer. And a look on the numbers show Tara Lawson-Remer with a very healthy lead at 60.7%. Kristen Gaspar just under 40%. And with results, naturally, comes reaction to how these races have played out. And for that, we turn to KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman. Matt, what can you tell us?
Maya, we're talking a lot about control of Congress, control of the Senate, but how about control of the San Diego County Board of Supervisors? After decades of having Republican control, that could be shifting, and that's because of some key races. We look at District 1, that's Supervisor Greg Cox's old seat, who's retiring after decades of service. We have two Democrats in that race, Nora Vargas against Ben Hueso, current state Senator Ben Hueso, and we see Nora Vargas with a big lead in that one, 54% to 45%, so about a 9-point lead right now early in this one. She's supposed to speak actually about right now, so we'll see if she's going to be what she's going to be saying. And then we go to District 2. Now that's Diane Jacob, a big name out there in the East County, very well liked out there. And we know that district's obviously going to go Republican. We have Steve Voss and Joel Anderson who are running in that one, and Steve Voss just etching out a lead right now, 50.9 to 40.1%. And now the big one that we go to, District 3, the only incumbent that's running for the County Board of Supervisors and not doing too hot right now, 39% for Kristen Gaspar, the Republican, to Tara Lawson Remer, 60.7%. I mean, that's a 20-point lead in that district. Gaspar's an incumbent. We thought maybe she would enjoy some lead here. Lawson Reimer, she spoke to supporters earlier this evening. She promised to shake things up for North County voters.
I'm so looking forward to bringing a new future to San Diego County, a future that values diversity, a future that values immigrant families, a future that values taking action on climate and protecting our beaches and coastlines.
Yeah, so obviously running against the incumbent, Kristen Gaspar. Now, we have not heard from her yet this evening. Obviously, as we see Lawson Remer taking a big lead in this race. And it'll be interesting to see how this sort of plays out. If we see sort of in District 1, if we see Nora Vargas come out and say, hey, I won this race. We know D1 and D2, we know D1 is going to go Democratic, and we know D2 is going to go Republican. So District 3, the one that all the eyes were on, there was a lot of money being spent in that race, but it looks like the Democrat, Tara Lawson Remer, is going to take that seat. Maya, we'll send it back to you.
Thanks so much, Matt. Now a quick check on some other races. We begin with the race to replace Kevin Faulconer as mayor of the city of San Diego. Barbara Bree versus Todd Gloria, both Democrats. Updated numbers show Todd Gloria with the lead at 57%, Barbara Bree still at 43%. Now to San Diego City Attorney incumbent Mara Elliott being challenged by public advocacy lawyer Corey Briggs. Mara Elliott is enjoying a lead at 69% to Corey Briggs' 31%. And now to the state propositions. Prop 15 to increase funding for schools, colleges, local government by changing tax assessment on commercial and industrial property. This proposition is also known as split roll, and this is a very tight proposition. The yeses are at 49.2% and the noes are at 50.8% so far. And now to Prop 22. This is the gig worker initiative. A yes vote would exempt gig companies like Uber and Lyft to treat workers as employees. The yeses are at 58%. The noes are at 42%. Let's update on the assembly race for the 77th district between now Democrat Brian Mainshine and Republican June Cutter. And Brian Mainshine is at 59.3%. June Cutter is at 40.7%. A quick check now on the 50th district. Amar Campa-Najjar and Darrell Issa. Again, we're seeing Darrell Issa has caught up and then some to Amar Campa-Najjar. They're both at 50%, but Darrell Issa has just a few more votes than Amar Campa-Najjar so far. And now to the 53rd district, Sarah Jacobs and Georgette Gomez. The numbers are showing Sarah Jacobs at 59%. Of course, the Associated Press, as I mentioned earlier, has already called this race, and the winner is Sarah Jacobs. And we want to check now on some new numbers in the presidential race. We're getting our numbers from the Associated Press, as I mentioned. Here's a look at where the Electoral College map stands now. President Trump has 213 electoral votes, while Joe Biden has 224. 270 is needed to win. Earlier tonight, Biden told supporters he was feeling good and to wait until every vote was counted.
I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. We knew because of the unprecedented early vote and the mail-in vote that it was going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted, every ballot is counted.
And tonight, the president is hosting a gathering at the White House, and he tweeted just a few moments ago that the Democrats are trying to steal the election. And we've been closely monitoring the voting process and the votes counted so far. Let's check in again with KPBS reporter Shalina Chatlani with an update on how everything is going. Shalina?
Well, Maya, so far tonight, around 1.1 million people from around the 1.95 million registered voters have been able to cast their ballot either at the polls or through mail-in ballots. And so that means that there's still a long way to go tonight. That means that voters are either allowed, that could also mean that it's a double-edged sword, because tonight it's not the number of ballots, it's not the number of precincts that are reporting, it's the number of ballots, it's a percentage of that that's going to be reported tonight. So like I said, that could be a double-edged sword, because that also means there could be a delay in the vote. Including the chunk of votes that could be coming in from the ballots that are coming in tonight at the voter's office. In fact, 60% of the vote has already been released, but of course, that means that there is still much to go, and that could make a huge difference in terms of some of the closer races, like the 50th district race that we just heard about recently between Representative Campa-Najjar and Representative Darrell Issa. So it'll just depend on how quickly those votes come in tonight.
Great. Thank you so much, Shalina. Now we're going to check back with KPBS's Amita Sharma with some final thoughts. Amita?
Thank you, Maya. Let's take a moment to get a few final thoughts on some of the major developments from this election night. For that, we turn to our analyst, lawyer Dan Eaton, and SDSU political science professor Ben Gonzalez O'Brien. Ben, we haven't yet spoken about the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. It looks like Republicans are robustly defending their control of the Senate. What are some big surprises here?
Well, I think there was a belief that this was going to be a much better night for Democrats when it came to some of these close Senate seats in places like North Carolina, Maine, where Susan Collins is currently leading. So far, they have that one pickup, that expected pickup in Colorado, but they also lost a seat in Alabama. So this doesn't really look like that shift in power that was expected on the eve of the election. And this has to be a disappointment for the Democratic Party, and this has to be a disappointment for progressives. This is not really what was expected, and even if Biden wins the presidency, he is in all likelihood going to have a Republican Senate. At least that's the way it looks so far.
Dan, Joe Biden's campaign has said it is ready for any kind of legal challenge, legal election challenge by President Trump and Republicans. What does that mean?
It means that the critical issue could come down in a couple of states is not that votes that are actually postmarked by Election Day, but that are received the days after the election day because of exceptions that courts have made. The question is going to come down to Article 2, which seems to put the power in the hands of the legislature. That's where the battle is going to be with the courts, and we'll have to see what happens. Louis Brandeis, great Supreme Court justice, once said that the most important office in a democracy, the most important political office in a democracy, is that of private citizen. We are definitely seeing that on all levels tonight.
Ben, Florida was key to President Trump winning a second term. He has won Florida. What do the results we're seeing right now say about how he might get to a second term?
Well, I think these are good results if you're Donald Trump and the Trump campaign. Again, a lot of polling had shown the president trailing in a lot of these states, and the president's campaign had said that they believed the polls were wrong, and they look like they were right on this. Now, state polling is subject to pretty wide margins of error and other things, but again, he's beating expectations currently, including in a lot of those states that Democrats were kind of eyeing. You had Joe Biden going to Georgia. You had them thinking that Florida may lean, even doing some stops in Texas. Kamala Harris was out in Texas because Democrats thought that they maybe could swing that state. And what we're seeing is that the map is looking very similar to what we had in 2016. And so again, what's going to count are Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
Dan, how likely is it that there will be a lengthy legal fight over the ballots and counting them across the United States?
The longer the night goes on, the more likely a long legal battle is ahead of us. It's going to be like Bush versus Gore, only different. But this is 2020. Why should we expect that anything will go as expected?
And Ben, I want to ask you about the times that we're living in. You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. More than 230,000 people have died. There's high unemployment. People are hurting. They're having a tough time putting food on the table. What kind of message are you getting from the presidential vote count right now on how voters feel about things?
Well, I think the presidential vote count reveals the deep divisions in this country, both over COVID-19 and the pandemic and how it should be addressed, and about a lot of the ills that are facing the nation right now, from the unrest we've seen due to police violence against communities of color, and a host of other issues that have really divided the American public. And that we're seeing that tonight. We're seeing that reflected in the votes. And while it's exciting to see what looks to be record high turnout this election, I think the turnout and the vote shares for both candidates reveal the deep divisions in this country.
Thank you. Ben Gonzalez O'Brien, SDSU political science professor, and legal analyst Dan Eaton. Thank you so much for your time and your insights this evening.
Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this special KPBS election night coverage. We will, of course, stay on top of the races, and you can too by going to kpbs.org and waking up with us on the radio at 89.5 FM.
We want to thank you for joining us.
For all of us here at KPBS, we wish you a good night.